Janet here at the Sheepwalk Ranch and Fiber Mill. Apologize for looking so haggard this morning, but we've been pulling 10 to 12 hour shifts and I just feel like a video needs to get made. I need to do my episode 9, so if it looks like it's a little crooked, it's probably because I'm feeling a little crooked today. This is episode 9 because I'm starting to keep track of this, and the subject is farm, fiber, and forage. And I started like a little TikTok video yesterday just to sort of celebrate a happy earth every day. And the topic of forage is a huge one for us here in the community. There are so many different philosophies. One says too much alfalfa makes too much grease. Another one says not enough alfalfa, quality of wool not so good. There's just so many different things. For us, we don't do a lot of grain feeding. We deliberately avoid feeding them the junk food because then they become codependent on it. It's not healthy for them. I would rather give them the minerals straight up than try to find it through the food, the junky food that they've got out there. And then we do mostly forage. And when I do forage, our hay is forage as well. So what we bale out in the front fields, we have about 26 acres that can be baled. It's going to be a mix of Bermuda, Tifton. It's going to have natural herbs and whatever stuff is in there. And the sheep are pretty darn smart. They know not to eat the toxic stuff. There's just a natural aversion to that bad plant that might be out there. But we worked really hard. We're trying to squeeze out the bad stuff by putting more of the good stuff in. So we actually have several paddocks where we're doing experimental grasses. And with those different grass types, we're able to see, okay, what are they eating, what are they not eating? And if they're not eating it, is that for the llamas? So the llama's gonna want that. Well, the goats will pretty much eat everything, but everything that our animals take in affects their fiber. So I've actually chosen what I perceive to be more of a long wool type, not the churro, it's a dual coat, but I have Leicester long wool, and then I have Swiss Filet Black Nose, which is the hot topic for Maryland, not this weekend, the weekend after. And then I have this gorgeous Navajo churro, and as you can see, there's still this, so the long wool aspect on their coat is this hair that comes off, right? And then you have this downy underlayer, which is where all the beauty is. And honestly, I love the whole lock the way that it is. And we don't fiber separate unless if our customers want sweater yarn. And the reason we don't fiber separate on stuff like that is to maintain its integrity. And integrity is very important in my world. Especially when it comes to fiber. You know, the beauty of hand spinning is that you have the control to work through these shorter bits that might be mixed in with these longer ones. So if they start to just show up and they get in the way, you can actually make your adjustments in the hand spinning. Now in the mill spinning process, these short bits, if they're blended in with those long bits, it's going to actually change the structure of the spin. And so where we have to be aware is on our speed, on our draft, and on our twist per inch, how are we making those adjustments? Because this downy fluff is going to be overpowered by this wire outer coat, which probably registers at above 55 micron count. And then same with the Leicester long wool. What's unique about the Leicester and the Swiss Filet is that they have curl, they have a faux crimp. I know that's not, someone's gonna argue with me on that for saying that term, but it's there is a bounce to it. So what I found is even on a single ply that there's a little bit of bloom as it goes through, because as it gets stretched in that draft, which I'm failing at doing because I'm so exhausted, is as it stretches, there's gonna be some play, some give and take. And the same thing here, but texturally, even though there's long wool genetic in the Swiss Filet, texturally, they're two totally different beasts. This actually is a low grease. This is a higher grease content. And the Navajo churro, it's give and take. It depends on where they're being raised and what they're being fed. And I know that I have no say in that, and I don't need to have any say in it, because as long as it performs in the mill and I can get the output that the customer wants, then I've done my job. We have a unique opportunity to challenge ourselves. So draft, you can long draw. Sorry, it's just a little thing pop on my screen. But on draft, when you're hand spinning it, you can change, right? You make your adjustment for that length. So if you look at the width of my hand is what, about 3.5 inches. It's pretty big width there. But I can change when I look at this lock and I can see it and I lay it across my hand. I can make that adjustment. I know now that if my hand is 3.5 inches, that I'm probably looking at a 5-inch lock. So stretched out, just not stretched out, it's already about 4.5 inches. So stretched out, we're looking at 5 inches. We've kind of hit that comfort zone in the mill. When you start to exceed that 5-inch mark, that's where people get a little uncomfortable with their spinners. And even though we can extend our draft, we can make that adjustment for those staple lengths, there's still some unpredictability. And you have this opportunity where a longer strand might come in and catch some of the more standard lengths and try to create I call them whirligigs, tornadoes, whatever, poofy floofs, but it's going to end up creating slubs, essentially. And if you're doing it intentionally, well, bravo, you've just begun the process of boucle, but most people don't want unintentional boucle on their yarn. So with us, I have seen a difference in quality of fleece just because of how we graze our sheep. So as I said, they're like 99% grass-fed. We feed them what they can forage here, and then we supplement sometimes with coastal hay. And then it's on us to figure out, okay, what kind of a farm did we get our hay from? Does it have chemicals in it? Was it natural, organic, whatever? That's a big deal for us. And so one of the things that we've been doing, and it was a word that I threw out there yesterday, is rewilding. And in the process of rewilding, I've noticed that, like the Jacobs, for instance, and the Shetlands, they'll eat anything that a goat will eat. I mean, they're so different in the way that they graze, and the nutrients that they're getting from each one of those plants is really important. And so it changes the quality of their wool. And that's why rewilding and I never can say this word, regenerative farming is a big deal for us. So I'm going to just call carbon farming because I can never say regenerative. I don't know why. It's a good word too. So we choose to do carbon farming where we're incorporating the wool and the poop from all the animals back in. And so in the second part of this video, you're going to see us outside where I talk about what we're doing out there to help improve and to promote. And when we cut back and trim and we weed, we're very cognizant of what's toxic to our animals, but we make sure that if it's not toxic, that we're throwing it back over the fence because that's vegetables to them. And we want a healthy sheep. We want a sheep that knows how to live off the land and that we're providing it with what it needs. And by allowing the property to semi-rewild itself, and there's some control spaces, we're allowing the sheep to actually get back to that ancient way of grazing where they're eating what is supposed to be there for them versus us trying to force a situation on them. So when I go to process these, I can tell you right now, just judging by this is still in the grease, those have been washed, there's a little bit of staining, but that's just from age, this is low grease, and it tells me that they're not giving them a super high protein diet that's being fed to them, that this is a more natural grazed, or whatever hay they're getting, whatever feed they're giving to them is also a much more natural, not high in too much of anything kind of feed, and that allows them to get that minimal amount of grease. And because if you talk to the Navajo churro folk, they'll tell you, like at least the people that I've talked to, is that your churro is not supposed to be super greasy. That was one of the blessings of that breed. And with Leicester long wools, I find that my greasiest ones are usually my males, and that's because they're just constantly rutting. They're always thinking about it. But the Swiss fillet, they wear their grease close to the skin. So when you shear them, it shears almost like a mohair goat, kind of like the Leicester long wool, but there's enough grease in their fleece that their fleece tends to stay intact. Whereas I've noticed that when you're shearing the Swiss fillet, that it has a higher propensity to falling apart as you're shearing it, which to me is more like a mohair in the end. Sorry, I didn't mean to touch the microphone, but that's where I'm at right now, and hopefully that will be useful information. So the next step is we're going to go outside. Thank you so much. I need to pay homage to the people who've inspired me. So this little stand right there is from my grandmother's kitchen. It's an old little like 1970s style wine rack that folds up. But today and for its future, it's going to be a stand for okra. And if I need it somewhere else, I'll use it somewhere else, or I'll find someone else's bit of history and put it in the garden. But we're not wasting a thing. So it's a fantastic, fantastic way to pay homage to the people who have helped create me. Hey, so before I go any further, we just came out of the fiber mill, and I had to tell you, this humidity, if you see me, ugh, it's like this humidity is just, I mean, I grew up in a drier climate. I don't understand the humidity, but Houston keeps moving here, and so they've pretty much brought their weather with them, is all I could come up with. And it's not a bad thing, but humidity is very deceiving. And so before I go any further on that subject, my name is Jennifer. I already introduced myself in the first part of the video, but what you didn't know is that I grew up in Southern California. And in Southern California, where I grew up, in the time that I grew up, which, you know, I'm not exactly as young as I want to think that I am, we had a very dry climate. I want to liken it to more of a desert climate, even at the beach. And if we had humidity, it was just like that random 1 month, you know, that year that, you know, where you're transitioning from spring to summer, and there was a lot of overcast. But you knew come noon that sun was going to break through, and boom, you're going to be sunburnt either before or after. You just never knew. And so growing in Southern California has always been predictable. You knew what you could do, you knew what your limitations were. And then when I moved back a few years ago with my boys, back in 2008, it had started shifting. It was shifting from a dry climate to that San Diego climate, where it was a little bit cooler, definitely a lot more wet. I had a lot of trouble finding my sunlight. The good sunlight was on the side where you're not supposed to plant your tomatoes, you know, the side where people can actually see them. So I had to really work my butt off to get anything to grow without it rotting or wilting, being oversaturated. So you learned how to do your math when it came down to watering and timing and all that. So, but I also grew up in a family of farmers. Between my dad, my two dads, my grandparents on both sides, if they weren't working the farm, they were having the farm. And so they grew up in a time where you had chickens in your backyard. It was still an okay thing to do. And everybody had a sustainable little, you know, post World War II garden. But before World War II, they still had the garden. There was always a garden somewhere where you were raising your summer vegetables. Maybe they weren't doing their fall crops, but my grandmother tended to that garden. My grandfather tended to the garden. We had winter fruits, summer fruits, the veggies, everything. So her philosophy was pretty simple, and she never had to take any magic, you know, juices or pills. She was actually staying younger and healthier because she was eating everything that she grew out of her garden, and she was cooking her meat fresh. Now, the chicken's questionable. It didn't come from an organic farmer, but the reality check is she was still making everything that she ate. It was beautiful, and it is a beautiful thing that we could all still have that ability to do that. We should be taking advantage of it. So when I get on my diatribe, I realize that I feel like I'm kind of like in an Arlo Guthrie song, like, boom, 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 you know. I mean, if everybody had a pot, one pot, and you planted a seed into it, and you watered it, and you tended to it, then you would be participating in a worldwide movement, a movement to change our perspective again, to go back to who we were. We weren't always living in cities in these square, you know, blocks with windows into them, and we're constantly looking out to nature, but we're never inviting nature back in. And that's where some of our problems are, is we need to find a way to invite it back into our lives. And one of the ways I've done it is go back to farming, but in a bigger way than my grandfather or anyone in the family could have afforded at that time. And I've added a number of sheep. I have the llamas. If I need bunny poop, I know where to go find it. And the same with alpacas and all that. I know who my sources are. We don't need pigs. I know who's going to raise the pigs. I don't necessarily need a cow because I know who has the cows. So we create this circular economy and work all together. And you know, you throw in people like Sasha and Cassie community who come and work on the ranch with me, and they're working knowledge of how to plant, when to plant, where to plant, what's beneficial, what can be turned into a salve, what is going to help my sheep. This is all the stuff that we're working on now to make it more symbiotic, so that when we are planting for fall, we're already thinking about springtime again, and what's going to come back, what's not going to come back, what can be harvested 2 years from now and versus harvested this year. So the movement to rewild and to work with carbon farming and find that weird happy medium in between, that's our challenge. And so it's hard for me to turn my camera, but I'm going to do it anyways. And I've accepted myself for who I am. I was built like a potato picker. I belong somewhere in some rural country. My tan is my tan. So I get it. This is what the real world looks like. So I've showed this picture, but in the last couple of days we've been hit with beautiful rain, and you can see that there is a mix of nasty nightshade, which isn't a bad thing, except that it will reseed itself. We had some sunflowers. I've got stuff growing around the plants. I have mustard seed. I have some thistles. I have 2 puppies that poop everywhere. The other 2 are hiding from me. But the reality check is that everything in here is working together, and rather than fighting nature, we're going to nurture it. So we have a bunny that lives down at, and it'll be in the next little snapshot, but we do have a bunny. I know the squirrels attack my stuff. The birds come after my fruits, so I will put nets over them this year because I'd like to actually taste one of my peaches and not just think about what happened. We shut the gate because the deer will come in and annihilate this entire village. The sheep are not allowed to come near my orchard anymore because I learned the lesson the hard way. I let them in for 1 day of grazing and came out with nothing left. And so we're just getting ready to plant more grapes and more stuff. So where it looks like a crime scene on the other side there, we're gonna get ready to rebuild those layers. And what's nice is the grass is growing into that soil right now. So as we turn it, that nitrogen will go back in, we'll layer it with wool, and we'll do all kinds of really cool stuff to make it work. So in terms of foraging, we have this field, we have that field. We call that the Hill Country Mix. And what we've done is we've gone to different seed providers and we're planting different types of fields, different pastures essentially. And we didn't set this place up the way it is. I have to give a huge shout out to the Jennings and whoever came before, Doc Williamson, any of them, because their vision is there. It's just that when they started moving on to the next phase of their lives, the land kind of just sort of was left behind. And it hasn't taken much. It's taken us 4 years. 4 years of learning hard lessons, 4 years of experimenting and learning that you can't just put stuff in the ground. You actually have to nurture that earth first before the seed's gonna grow. But the philosophy is this: it doesn't matter who plants a seed as long as you plant it right. It doesn't matter who waters it as long as we all know it has to be watered. So the dog's about to knock my camera over. So if we nurture our nature but don't overdo it, that symbiosis between the wild and the tame will meet in the middle, and somewhere we'll have this beautiful vegetation providing us with what we need for our tables, providing our livestock what they need to survive and to have healthier fleeces and healthier lifestyles. And little bunny Fufu and our wild creatures, oh boy, she almost knocked that over. Sorry, puppies. And hold on. Let me just tell you. See this? Every time I do a video, okay, she hasn't started barking yet, but if you hadn't gotten a headache yet from that, I get a headache from it. But it's all symbiotic. So what we're building towards is homegrown fresh meats, homegrown wool, homegrown veggies and fruits. We want to fill our fruit stands up. We want to have a more successful marketplace where we can share with people. And then my ex-husband's Austrian, and so I was always madly in love with the countryside. And so when we lived in Oberfort, we would go to Heidegger, and I know I'm not saying it perfect, but Heidegger, and the food that you would eat was grown on that farm. So kind of like what Sovereignty Ranch is doing. A huge shout out to Molly and her crew. We are this big, and she is like that big, okay? Massive. And so we just want to do a little bit of everything so that we can diversify our farm to make it more functional and more financially stable. But I always know, And this is something that you have to understand, that what we do is not gonna make us rich. I'm not even sure it's gonna make me famous. I'm always infamous. I'd rather be infamous anyways. So I'm infamous in my own community. But it is going to bring you a certain level of fulfillment. So if this is your passion, even if you have a half-acre plot, I've seen everything from where they take this much and they make it look like it's this big, and then you have this big where it's not manageable, but somehow they manage to find ways to make everything work together, and using the paddock system. Everything that we do is important, but if we all do it together, plant that seed, everyone just from here, I don't care what you start with, a pot, whatever, if we all plant that seed and water it, then we're now saying, okay, enough is enough. It's okay to be a farmer. I have a different verb, of farming than you do, or a different way of using the word farming. I don't know, I'm gonna get lambasted for that probably, but basically, we're taking just something and making it into something better. And that's the most important detail. So it's probably my most dumbed down, like I'm so exhausted because we work 10 to 12 hours a week. Now the good news is, this is the good news. We're gonna have 4 fiber mills in the state of Texas. I haven't been chomping at the bit to announce that. It's not a big deal to me because every one of us has a different starting point. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different passions. We're doing it for different reasons. And for us, it was that final step in the story, because the farm was here, the livestock was here, the shop, I already had the yarn shop. So I already had all this stuff in place. I've done the festivals, and now we've added the fiber mill. And so having that gives me a chance to help tell the stories that I want to tell, and I get to do it through other people's fiber. And every fiber mill in Texas is going to have that opportunity. And there's a possibility for a 5th. I always say there's a possibility for more. We cannot service everybody. And with the fiber shed movement, which I don't partake in personally, we're the Texas Fiber Gathering. The fiber shed movement is a beautiful movement. I follow the one out of California and a few from different states, but it's really true. For every one fiber mill, 3 close. Wow, that was close. I almost put 4. 3 close. 1, 2, 3. So in 3 close, that puts that burden on the one fiber mill. So for us to have Marlin Farms, Sheer Joy, Independence, and Kerrville, which is only 20 minutes away from me, by the way, really cool. And me here, the sheep walk, and then I know there's other mills, but there may be reasons why they're not public. So just be patient. You don't know. We don't know what the story is. Just in our territories. So that covers the hill country, to East Texas, and then over to Seguin area and Natalia. So we're kind of in a zone, but it's because this is a good temperate climate for running a mill. So, but anyways, sorry, I'm starting to look at my livestock getting like, ooh, who's there? I will stop bloviating. I will get off the tube here and give you a chance to digest all that. So happy farming, and welcome to the sheep walk. So this is kind of one of the things I'm talking about with rewilding. We don't even cut down the sunflowers where we know that they're coming up, and I do let them come to head, but we cut the heads off and repurpose everything. But you can see this is like a perfect snack for a goat. And there's a lot of stuff going on underneath these plants, and so we choose not to hurt them. The flowers on these guys are beneficial, the fruits on them are beneficial, and all I'll do is I'll trim them back. But like, I know for a fact that just down that way is little bunny Foo-Foo underneath the oak tree. Little bunny Foo-Foo hasn't caused any harm. And the nice thing about putting your wool around the bases of your trees, if there was any exposure due to nature, then the wool is going to protect those roots. But the next thing we did to work with nature and not against it was to put up this frame. And then what we're gonna do with that frame is we're gonna layer it. We're gonna put something over the top of it so that little bunny Foo-Foo can eat the greens and then poop all over it. Because I'm a big advocate for bunny poop, or any kind of like livestock poop. But you have to know what's cold, what's hot, and bunnies are cold, they can direct sow their poop onto this, and my beets are gonna be happy and my fall crops are gonna be happy.